Imagine a 17-year-old kid, it's a Friday night, and his peers are all out at, weekend parties doing the normal friendly gatherings that pretty much define adolescence.
Sure.
But he isn't there. He is entirely alone in this dark, unair-conditioned gym, just repeatedly dribbling a basketball until his hands are literally raw, and he's like physically falling asleep on the hardwood.
Exactly.
So the question is this some tragedy of modern social isolation, or is it the exact necessary recipe for becoming Kobe Bryant?
I think we both know the answer to that.
Well, today on our deep dive, we are unpacking the psychology of extreme achievement. Specifically, we're dissecting this highly controversial philosophy of total solitude and radical self-ownership.
It's a crucial topic.
It is. We are looking right at you, the listener, and asking, is shutting out the entire world the ultimate secret to unlocking your true potential? Or is it just a spectacularly fast track to total misery?
It's definitely not misery if you do it right.
Well, I have to lay my cards on the table here. From my years of studying human behavior, I strongly argue that this lone wolf mentality is a toxic modern obsession.
I just have to stop you right there. I completely disagree with the premise you're establishing.
Let me just finish my point.
No, because based on my own long-term behavioral analysis of ultra-high performers, there is absolutely no logical basis for your view. None.
I mean, treating life as a solitary grind is a guaranteed recipe for psychological burnout.
That is just not true. I can state categorically that without a period of intense, painful, and deliberate isolation, true greatness is literally impossible.
But you're completely ignoring our biology.
Your perspective is comfortable, it's, socially acceptable, but when we look at the actual mechanisms of human optimization, it is fundamentally flawed.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I am firmly pushing back on that. You're trying to frame isolation as some kind of cognitive superpower.
Because it is.
But let's look at the reality of how humans work. We are inherently social creatures. For 200,000 years, being separated from the tribe meant literal death.
We aren't living on the savannah anymore.
But our brains don't know that. They're hardwired to release stress hormones like cortisol when you're isolated. So when people spend hours alone in the dark, they aren't building a superpower.
They absolutely are.
No, they're actively fighting their own biology. This whole concept is a monster masquerading as a path to success. Enforced solitude usually just makes people feel incredibly inadequate.
What's fascinating here is how quickly you equate the act of being alone with being some passive victim of biology.
It's not victimhood, it's science.
You're conflating involuntary abandonment with intentional strategic solitude. And that perspective is, frankly, just an excuse to settle for mediocrity.
Wow, an excuse.
Yes. Let's look at the mechanics of the elite mind. Let's go back to that 17-year-old Kobe Bryant in the dark.
Okay, let's look at him.
You see a lonely kid fighting his biology. I see a highly optimized environment. Why the dark? Think of the mind like a sensory deprivation tank.
Right.
When you remove the noise of other people's opinions, the social friction, the need to perform for a peer group, the signal-to-noise ratio in the brain completely shifts.
Sure, but
Just stop reacting to external stimuli and start hearing your own internal baseline. That lonely rec room was the exact environment where he discovered an unmatched hunger.
I understand the sensory deprivation analogy, I really do, but isn't that just an extreme exception for, professional athletes?
Not at all.
We're talking about a microscopic percentage of the population who are genetically primed for physical combat. You can't just apply a teenager dribbling in the dark to the everyday professional listening to us right now.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying cognitive mechanism applies universally. Let's pivot to business logic.
Okay, let's hear it.
Look at top-tier executives. The mechanism is identical. Take the 5 a.m. morning run. A leader is out there, completely isolated from the news cycle, cut off from social media, completely alone.
Right, getting some exercise?
It's more than exercise. Why is that specific isolated moment exactly when a CEO figures out who needs to be hired, who needs to be fired, and how to scale customer acquisition?
Endorphins.
No, it's about cognitive load. Social conformity and constant connectivity severely drain brain's executive function.
I mean, we are all distracted, sure.
Exactly. So by isolating, they are actively eliminating the automatic existence that traps 99% of people. The people who are exhausting their mental energy just trying to fit in, watching mindless TV and eating fast food.
So it's about eliminating distractions.
It frees up the prefrontal cortex to do the deep strategic work.
So let me ask you, the listener, right now, are you isolating yourself productively to lower your cognitive load, or are you just hiding?
That's a vital distinction.
Because what you're describing sounds a lot like using focus as an excuse to avoid the messy, difficult realities of dealing with other people.
It's not avoidance, it's optimization.
Which brings us to the inevitable psychological consequence of this total isolation. When you strip away the crowd, you also strip away your scapegoats.
Which is the best part.
You can't blame your team or your friends if you're the only one in the room. This forces what is often called radical accountability, and I find the way this is practiced deeply problematic.
Problematic how? Taking ownership of your outcomes is the purest form of logic.
Because it frequently crosses the line into absolute victim blaming.
I completely disagree.
You are looking at someone who might be chronically rejected and telling them it is 100% their own fault.
Because usually it is.
You're arguing it's due to their own cowardice or lack of social skills, and that the problem is deep, difficult, and horrible to fix. That completely ignores systemic external reality.
You're focusing on the wrong thing.
What if they just have a terribly abusive boss? What about sheer, unpredictable bad luck? You cannot scientifically or morally tell people their suffering is entirely their own fault.
Wait a minute. I completely disagree with this point you're making. Because you are looking at the symptom rather than the psychological mechanism.
The symptom is real life.
Let's talk about the locus of control. If you possess an external locus of control, meaning you believe the boss or bad luck are the primary drivers of your life, your brain's problem-solving centers literally shut down.
They don't shut down, they just recognize reality.
Waiting for the cavalry to come save you is a psychological delusion. If you sit there blaming circumstances, you ensure that absolutely zero changes are ever made. If you are chronically rejected, brushing it off by saying, the world is just unfair, is intellectual cowardice. It robs the individual of their own agency.
It's not cowardice to acknowledge that the playing field isn't always level. It's just objective reality.
It is cowardice to avoid the mirror. To reclaim that agency, you have to shift to a radical internal locus of control. You have to literally put yourself on punishment.
Put yourself on punishment. Do you hear how unnecessarily punitive that sounds?
And I don't mean that metaphorically. You have to look at your life and strip away the dopamine spikes. No more TV, no more snacks, no more desserts or alcohol.
You're treating the human psyche like it needs to be broken?
You force a dopamine baseline reset, you strip away every comfort, look yourself dead in the eye, and ask why you are only giving 50% when your goals require 120%.
That kind of self-flagellation is incredibly harsh. Clinically, it often leads to severe anxiety.
It is harsh because the alternative is a wasted life. You owe you an explanation.
That is just...
You let you down. That is the hardest, most painful sentence a human being can utter. But it is also the most liberating.
But what about people who are genuinely depressed?
When you are feeling chronically stressed, depressed, and constantly self-sabotaging, that cycle is almost never broken by a supportive pat on the back.
I disagree with that.
It is only broken by facing the mirror and admitting your own complicity. Reclaiming that blame is how you reclaim your power to change it.
But let's look at the emotional fallout of that process. Because this extreme, harsh self-accountability, it breeds intense, often volatile emotions.
Emotions are just tools.
If you are constantly punishing yourself and taking on the weight of every failure, you start running on anger. You start running on spite.
And spite is a fantastic fuel.
You see this constantly in hyper-competitive mindsets. They want to create an enemy, or they talk about wanting to kill those guys. From a biological standpoint, running on chronic anger is unsustainable.
This raises an important question about how we define the utility of our emotions.
You cannot build a healthy existence on a foundation of rage.
You view anger as a toxic stressor. I view it, when properly managed, as an incredibly motivating, highly logical tool for hyperfocus. It's not chronic stress. It is emotional alchemy.
Emotional alchemy. That sounds like a buzzword. Explain the science.
Gladly. Anger triggers a very specific dopamine and epinephrine cascade in the brain. It physically narrows your visual and cognitive field, literally blocking out peripheral distractions.
Okay.
Let's look at the fighting world. There is a very famous Irish mixed martial artist. Early in his career, everyone laughed at him. They said hell no to his chances.
Right.
They celebrated his losses and called him a joke. He didn't go to therapy to process his feelings of rejection. He took the sound of that laughter and he used it as pure fuel.
But again, that's a combat sport. Of course, anger works in a literal cage fight.
It works in the mind, which is the ultimate cage. Look at the history of legendary fighters building focus.
Like who?
Like a young heavyweight talking to his trainer Cuss for hours every single night. They were actively building up so much mental armor, so much focused aggression, that the fundamental fear of being bullied vanished entirely.
They manufactured anger.
They manufactured a controlled emotion to override their natural fear responses. That is the alchemy.
So what does this actually mean for a normal person trying to advance their career? It means you become a hostile, paranoid individual.
I strongly push back on that interpretation.
You're walking into a boardroom, or worse, a family dinner, with the emotional state of a gladiator.
It isn't hostility, it is absolute boundary setting.
Right.
Wolves don't lose sleep over the opinions of a lesser species.
That is, frankly, stunning.
When you are operating at the highest possible frequency of human achievement, you become immune to social friction. A beast is simply someone who can go through hell and still be grateful their legs work.
I am frankly stunned by how cold that is. And it brings us to what I believe is the core flaw in this entire philosophy.
There is no flaw.
To harness that kind of fierce anger, you have to make your mission deeply, exclusively about you. And hyper-focusing on your own dreams is fundamentally selfish.
You're completely missing the core mechanic of human drive entirely.
People have mothers who are trying to put food on the table. They have fathers counting on them, siblings watching them. You have to do it for them. You have to stay engaged in your social circle.
Yes, you do it for your family, but from a psychological standpoint, you absolutely must do it for yourself first. You have to eat, sleep, and breathe the dream when it isn't tangible.
Doing it for others grounds us.
Relying on external obligation is an extrinsic motivator, and the data shows that extrinsic motivator is a remarkably weak fuel source when the friction gets high.
How on earth is wanting to provide for your mother a weak fuel source?
Because when it's 3 a.m. and you are exhausted, obligation to others suddenly feels like a burden, not a catalyst.
I just don't buy that.
Let me give you a clinical example. Consider a person weighing 300 pounds. They described feeling trapped in a box. Their mind was completely shackled.
Okay.
If they just wanted to be healthy for their family, they would have quit 3 weeks later. Because the external reward doesn't outweigh the immediate internal discomfort.
So what did they do?
They made the transformation intensely, aggressively personal. They completely disregarded all external validation. And a year later, they achieved a total wow moment.
But at what cost? I understand the power of intrinsic motivation, but to sever all ties, I want to speak to you, the listener, for a second. It is terrifying to think about severing ties with reality.
Following your dreams is a lonely, scary, dangerous pursuit. If you want it less than you want a part of your sleep, you will fail.
Okay, well, hold on. Let me just pause the debate for a second.
Sure.
I am listening closely to your argument. And despite our profound disagreements on the biology and the ethics of this today, I am noticing a very specific pattern in your logic.
Which is?
A concept you keep orbiting around, you keep mentioning variables of time. You use the word seasons.
Yes, the variables of time and focus are critical.
Right. And here is where I think we might actually find the synthesis in all this extreme rhetoric. I am still highly skeptical of the collateral damage this causes if it's adopted as a permanent lifestyle.
Which it shouldn't be.
Exactly. Living your entire life isolated, angry, and obsessively self-centered would be toxic. But what you are describing isn't a permanent exile, it's a crucible.
Precisely. You cannot sustain the dopamine epinephrine cascade indefinitely. It is what I officially
You know the exact one. When you are around your friends, maybe at one of those weekend parties, but you feel totally, inexplicably disconnected. What if that gnawing feeling isn't loneliness at all?
Exactly.
What if it's just your own ambition finally speaking louder than your desperate need to belong? Are you brave enough to step into your lonely chapter today?